कब तक दूंगा हमारे पास 15 सितंबर तक है। 15 से पे किया हुआ
जी
15 का पेमेंट है इसमें।
वो तो है मैम, वो सर करते हैं, फैसल साहब होते हैं इससे। चौथा ही सबसे बात कर, वो तो जब तक क्लासे हैं, आगे टेस्ट वगैरह भी होंगे, वो भी इसी पे होंगे।
अच्छा अगर बच्चे ना आए तो डेंसिटी भी होंगे।
तो नेक्स्ट ईयर के लिए 15 से,
अच्छा
नेक्स्ट ईयर नेक्स्ट क्लास स्टार्ट हो।
Assalamu alaikum students. As I've messaged you in your WhatsApp group that I'm going to have an OSPE session with you, which is a question and answer session. I hope you are unmute. So this is from your exam point of view. I'm going to put up a slide and I'm going to ask you questions and you are going to answer, and then I'm going to tell you. Okay, you can see the gross of this lesion, okay? Are you listening to me? Are you unmute? So the question is, a 45-year-old female presented in surgical OPD with a swelling in front of her neck. On examination, the swelling was irregular and it moves with swallowing. Investigations were done and she was operated. The above picture which I have shown you is the gross appearance of her lesion. What is your diagnosis of this gross lesion? Anyone? Anyone who is mute can tell me what is the gross appearance of the lesion. What is your diagnosis? What are two prominent gross features seen in this lesion? Comment on the thyroid stimulating hormone. Any student who would like to answer these questions? ये रिकॉर्ड हो रहा है? रिकॉर्ड हो रहा है? अच्छा, ये है अनम्यूट या नहीं है? हाँ,
म्यूट में नहीं किसी को नहीं किया। जी स्टूडेंट मैम आपसे बात करना चाह रही हैं, उनको आंसर करें, नहीं तो आपकी अटेंडेंस नहीं लगेगी आज की। किसी का भी नाम लेते हैं।
ओके, आमना बाबर, अलीबा, अली अशरफ, अलाइशा, अक्सा, एनीवन?
अटेंडेंस मिस हो जाएगी मैम से, जो मैम क्वेश्चन कर रही हैं उनको आंसर दें।
Nobody is going to give me an answer. I think they are not there. I think you people are not there and you are not attentive. I can repeat my question. छोड़ दो फिर OSPE नहीं कराते, कोई और निकाल दो. Okay, I'm not going to do the OSPE because it's an interactive session. I'm going to revise with the liver, okay? ये बंद करके आप liver का lecture निकाल दो. इसको फिर ना डालना है इसमें से. अच्छा, इसको डिलीट कर देना. ये वो बात ही नहीं करे तो फिर मैंने किससे जो तुम लिवर निकालो, लिवर पहला, लिवर एम्पिली ट्रैप 1 यहाँ ये. अगर ये ऑन करके ना बैठ जाते हैं इसीलिए. Okay, so I am not going to give you the OSPE session today because you are not responding at all. As requested by some of the students, they said that they want revision of liver, revision of CNS, and then revision of CVS. So I'm going to start with the revision of liver. Okay, as all of you know, we did liver and I told you in detail the hepatitis. I also told you in detail the tumors of the liver and also the other congenital conditions. Normal adult liver weighs 1400 to 1600 grams in weight. It is a dual blood supply. 60 to 70% of the blood comes from the portal vein and 30 to 40% comes from the hepatic artery. Portal vein and hepatic artery, they enter the liver through porta hepatis and at the inferior aspect of the liver. Branches of portal vein, hepatic artery and bile duct, they run parallel within each portal tract, and this is called the portal triad. Liver is divided into 1 to 2 millimeter lobules which are orientated around the terminal tributaries of the hepatic vein. Portal tracts at the lobule periphery are present. So this is the lobule of the liver. You can see these are the zones 1, 2, 3. Third zone is nearer to the central vein and the first zone is nearer to the blood supply. Okay, so this is one zone of the one lobule of the liver, and these portal tract run at the periphery of the lobule. Again, you can see these are the blood vessels, these are the bile ducts. This is all is called the portal triad, and portal vein, renal, hepatic artery and bile duct, they make the portal triad. This is the central vein, and these spaces, blood vascular spaces, are called sinusoids. And the hepatocytes are distributed along the sinusoid, where there is a very thin fenestrated endothelium within the sinusoid. That is because of the diffusion of the different nutrients in the metabolic products. These pinks are all hepatocytes, central vein, and these are sinusoids present in between the hepatocytes. So these are again the same picture. First, we are going to do the liver failure. The most severe consequences of liver disease is the liver failure, acute liver failure and chronic liver failure. Acute liver failure is the result of sudden and massive destruction of the liver parenchyma. Chronic liver failure follows upon years and decades of progressive liver injury. And this is because of the chronic conditions of the liver, in which can lead to cirrhosis as well, and lastly to the liver failure. Acute and chronic liver diseases develop in which an acute liver injury supervenes on a late stage chronic disease, or chronic disease itself flares up, leading to chronic liver failure. First, we'll do the acute liver failure. Acute liver illness is associated with encephalopathy, coagulopathy seen within the 26 weeks of initial liver injury in the absence of pre-existing liver disease. So when we call it as an acute liver failure, it is associated with encephalopathy and coagulopathy, which is seen within the 26 weeks of initial liver injury. And when we say acute liver failure, when there is no previous injury present to the liver, okay? The causes of acute liver failure can be massive liver necrosis caused by drugs and toxins. Acetaminophen is one kind of drug which is responsible for the 50% of cases of liver failure. Other drugs and toxins also can lead to acute liver failure, okay? Acute infections by hepatitis A virus, they can sometimes cause acute liver failure, and sometimes B viral infection can also lead to acute liver failure. Autoimmune hepatitis, it accounts for rest of the 50% of cases of acute liver failure. In the Asia, acute infections by hepatitis E and B predominates for acute liver failure. Other viruses like HIV virus, human immunodeficiency virus, CMV, cytomegalovirus can also lead to acute liver failure. So the causes of acute liver failure are massive because of the drugs. Acetaminophen is one of the kind which can lead to acute liver failure. The viral infections are hepatitis A and B viruses, and hepatitis E virus can also lead to acute liver failure, and viruses like human immunodeficiency virus and cytomegalovirus can also lead to acute liver failure, but 50% or the rest of the 50% of cases is because of the autoimmune hepatitis. Autoimmunity, you know, when your body produces antibodies towards your self-antigens, that is called the autoimmune diseases. So autoimmune hepatitis can also lead to acute liver failure. Morphologically, in acute liver failure, the livers are small and they're shrunken on the gross appearance. And microscopically, there are broad regions of parenchymal loss, which is surrounded by regenerating hepatocytes, and ductular reaction is seen depending upon the nature of the ductular reaction and insult. Toxic injury by acetaminophen takes hours to days, and it is brief period to develop fibrosis. So when the toxicity of the drug is more, there is going to be acute injury, and in this injury we are going to see the loss of hepatocyte. which are surrounded by regenerating hepatocyte, but the time is not enough for the fibrosis to be produced, okay? So in case of toxic injury by acetaminophen, it takes hours to days to develop, so fibrosis is not there. Viral hepatitis, which cause liver failure in weeks to months, some regeneration and fibrosis can be seen with necrosis. So in acute liver failure, there is going to be parenchymal loss, that is degenerating hepatocytes can be seen, and it is surrounded by regenerating hepatocytes, and ductular reaction can be seen as well. Morphologically diffuse microvascular steatosis is seen in fatty liver of pregnancy or idiosyncratic reaction to toxin. Microvesicular steatosis, इसका मतलब ये होता है कि small vesicles of fat are present in between the hepatocyte, which is called steatosis. Whenever there is fatty change in the liver, it is called steatosis. Microvesicular steatosis means small vesicles of fat are present within the cytoplasm of hepatocyte, calling it microvesicular steatosis. It is seen in fatty liver of pregnancy or idiosyncratic reaction to toxins. Hepatocytes are unable to perform usual metabolic functions due to mitochondrial dysfunction. Immunodeficiency and untreated infections with HIV and transplant immune suppression, non-hepatotropic viruses like CMV, HSV, and adenovirus can also cause fulminant hepatitis. So I've told you many causes of acute liver injury. Number one, I told you drugs like acetaminophen. Number two, I've told you because of the autoimmune hepatitis, in which autoantibodies are formed against your own hepatocytes. And number three, the viruses which are hepatotropic like hepatitis A, B virus, and non-hepatotropic viruses which are cytomegalovirus, HSV virus, adenovirus, and HIV viruses, they can all cause fulminant kind of hepatitis. I hope it is clear. So this is the acute viral hepatitis. You can see some fatty change as well in these cases. Here you can see degenerating and regenerating hepatocyte in acute liver failure. Here you can see the predominant ductular reaction. Small bile ducts are produced, and this is called the ductular reaction, acute liver failure. This is hepatic steatosis. You can see all fat cells because these are all hepatocyte, but the cytoplasm contain fat globules. That's why they do not stain with the H&E stain. They appear empty looking. So this is hepatic steatosis. The clinical course of the disease is like that. It manifests as nausea, vomiting, jaundice, followed by life-threatening encephalopathy and coagulopathy. Serum transaminases levels are elevated. Liver is initially enlarged, later shrinks. Liver function test you have done with Professor Tahir. He has told you that liver function test are serum bilirubin, SGOT, SGPT, or ALT, AST, and alkaline phosphatase. So serum transaminases are going to be high, and liver is initially enlarged, but later it shrinks in size. Alteration of bile formation follow, and icterus or yellow discoloration of the sclera of the eye and skin and mucous membrane can be seen because of the increased bile in the serum. Hepatic encephalopathy. It ranges from behavioral abnormalities to marked confusion, stupor, coma, and death. Neurological signs are hysterexis. So hepatic encephalopathy can be seen, which can range from behavioral abnormalities to marked confusion and stupor, coma, and death can be occur as well. The clinical course I'm continuing, coagulopathy. Liver is responsible for synthesis of vitamin K dependent and non-vitamin K dependent clotting factors. Early bruisability is an early sign and can lead to life-threatening intracranial hemorrhage. Liver also removes activated coagulation factors. Loss of this function can lead to disseminated intravascular coagulation. So the synthesis of vitamin K dependent clotting factors is decreased, which can lead to easy bruisability. Like if you scratch a skin, a bruise appears at that time. And life-threatening intracranial hemorrhage can also occur because of the loss of these vitamin K dependent and non-vitamin K dependent clotting factors. And liver, it also removes activated coagulation factors. So when these are not going to be removed, so disseminated intravascular coagulation can be seen within the circulatory system. Portal hypertension. Portal hypertension arises when there is diminished blood flow through the portal venous system, which occurs because of the prehepatic or posthepatic or intrahepatic shunting of the blood. So portal hypertension also develops. So what are the clinical features in acute liver failure? This is going to be patient has the nausea, vomiting followed by life-threatening encephalopathy and coagulopathy. Hepatic encephalopathy can lead to coma or stupor as well, and coagulopathy is because of the loss of synthesis of vitamin K dependent and non-vitamin K dependent factors. And also patient can have intracranial hemorrhage because of the loss of these factors, or if the coagulation factors they are not being cleared by the liver as they should be in a normal liver condition, there is loss of this can lead to disseminated intravascular coagulation. Portal hypertension can develop as well. Hepatorenal syndrome, what is this? Renal failure occurring in patients with liver failure with no renal pathology is because of the hepatorenal syndrome. Sodium retention occurs, impaired water excretion occur, and decreased renal perfusion and glomerular filtration are the main abnormalities. Rising blood urea, nitrogen, and creatinine levels are seen as well. So hepatorenal syndrome is when there is no damage to the kidney, but renal failure can be seen in conjunction with the hepatic failure that is known as hepatorenal syndrome. Sodium retention, impaired water excretion, and decreased renal perfusion and glomerular filtration are the main abnormalities. Blood urea rises and serum creatinine levels are also increased in size. Also increased in the serum. So blood urea, nitrogen, and creatinine levels are increased because of the hepatorenal syndrome. Next is the chronic liver failure. The causes of chronic liver failure, chronic hepatitis B and C, alcoholic and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and liver failure is associated with cirrhosis. Cirrhosis is what? Cirrhosis is marked by fibrosis, diffuse for transformation of the entire liver into regenerative parenchymal nodules, which are surrounded by fibrous bands and vascular shunting. Okay. So chronic acute liver failure, I hope you understand. In the chronic liver failure, we have started with the chronic liver failure. The causes are chronic hepatitis B and C viral infections, alcoholic and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Liver failure is associated with cirrhosis, and cirrhosis is a condition which is marked by diffuse transformation of the entire liver into regenerative parenchymal nodules, which are surrounded by fibrous tissue bands and vascular shunting. Child-Pugh classification of cirrhosis is class A, well compensated when there is the normal liver function is going on. Class B, partially decompensated, and class C, completely decompensated. This is known as Child-Pugh classification of cirrhosis. Well compensated, partially decompensated, and decompensated. Class A, B, and C. Morphologically, cirrhosis occurs diffusely with formation of fibrosis and regenerating nodules. Morphology of cirrhosis varies with the cause. Okay. So whenever you call it a cirrhosis, it can be micronodular cirrhosis or it can be a macronodular cirrhosis. And micronodules, small nodules are seen on the surface of the liver. And in macronodular, larger nodules are seen which are separated by fibrous tissue septa. And microscopically, you see fibrosis dividing the liver hepatocyte into different regenerating nodules. Okay. So this is seen microscopically. Prognosis depends upon the classification. Stem cell activation is seen in ductular reaction in cirrhosis. Ductular reaction increases with advancing stage of disease and usually prominent in cirrhosis. Regeneration of fibrosis, very uncommon, does occur rarely. With few treatments, fibrosis becomes thin and fragmented. As fibrous septa break apart, adjacent nodules of the regenerating parenchyma join. Cirrhotic livers show elements of progression and regression. Okay, so cirrhosis, I have told you, there will be regenerating nodules which are separated by fibrous tissue septa. And on gross appearance, they can be micronodular or macronodular. Microscopically, you can see large regenerating nodules and there is going to be fibrosis. Regression of fibrosis is very uncommon. It means once fibrosis occurs, it is not going to go back. The liver architecture is not going to go back into the normal, okay? And prominent ductular reaction can be seen because of the stem cell activation. So this is chronic liver failure. You can see a lot of chronic inflammatory infiltrate, and you can see regenerating hepatocyte, but not forming a proper node appearance of the microscopic appearance of liver. So in this, you can see a large regenerating nodule, and you can see this thick fibrous tissue septa, which is fibrosis, and this is because of the laying down of more collagen and fibrous tissue because of destruction of the liver parenchyma, and rest of the liver parenchyma regenerates in producing nodular appearance. Okay, and this regeneration by fibrosis and loss of normal architecture of the liver can lead to portal hypertension. Clinical features. 40% of patients not have symptoms unlike the advanced stage of the disease. Non-specific symptoms can be present like anorexia, weight loss, and weakness are seen. Symptoms can be hepatic encephalopathy, jaundice, coagulopathy, bleeding from esophageal varices, bacterial infections. They are the terminal events. Causes of death are same as of acute liver failure, and in some chronic liver diseases, it progresses to hepatocellular carcinoma. Okay. So the patient can be present with the non-specific symptoms like anorexia, nausea, vomiting, weight loss, weakness can be seen. And symptoms like hepatic encephalopathy, jaundice, coagulopathy, and bleeding from esophageal varices and bacterial infection are the events which are seen at the terminal stage of the illness. Okay. Cause of death is same as in acute liver failure, and in some chronic liver diseases, it progresses to hepatocellular carcinoma. That is the malignant tumor, the liver, which we have already discussed, but I'm going to discuss again here because I'm revising liver now. Additional symptoms which can be seen in chronic liver failure are pruritus. Itching can be very severe with raw skin leading to infection. Hyperestrogenemia, because of impaired estrogen metabolism in the male patient, can give rise to palmar erythema, spinal angiomata, hypogonadism, and gynecomastia. Hypogonadism is also seen in females due to disruption of hypothalamic pituitary axis function. So hyperestrogenism is because of the impaired estrogen metabolism, and in male patients it can give rise to palmar erythema, means redness in the skin of the palm. Spider angiomas are small blood vessels which can be present on your skin. Hypogonadism and gynecomastia can be seen, and hypogonadism can be seen in the females as well due to disruption of hypothalamic pituitary axis. Increased resistance to portal blood flow develops, can be divided into prehepatic. Okay, this finishes the chronic liver failure. I hope it's clear. I'm going to explain cirrhosis when we are going to do cirrhosis again. I've told you that cirrhosis is the destruction of the normal liver architecture by fibrous tissue bands which are thick, that are laid by collagen, and in between you can see regenerating hepatocyte. Because of this disruption of the normal architecture, the blood flow of the liver is going to be obstructed, leading to portal hypertension. And we can grade the cirrhosis or by the Child-Pugh classification. It is class A, class B, class C. Class A is well compensated, B is partially, and C is decompensated. And morphologically, I have told you grossly, you can see micro and macro nodule, and microscopically, you can see thick fibrous tissue septa like this, dividing the regenerating lobules into different lobules. And because of this fibrosis, portal hypertension develops because the blood flow is interfered in the portal tract, okay, in the portal circulation. And then I told you non-specific symptoms and specific symptoms as well of chronic liver failure. Additional symptoms are pruritus and hyperestrogenemia can also give rise to palmar erythema, spider angiomas, and hypogonadism and gynecomastia in male patient, and hypogonadism is also seen in female patient due to disruption of hypothalamic pituitary axis. Next is the portal hypertension. Portal hypertension means that increased resistance to portal blood flow develops. It can be divided into prehepatic, intrahepatic, and posthepatic causes. So increased blood pressure in the portal circulation is known as portal hypertension, and this is increased resistance to portal blood flow, which can be because of prehepatic causes, intrahepatic causes, or posthepatic causes. The prehepatic causes are conditions as obstructive thrombosis, narrowing of the portal vein before it ramifies into the liver, or messes splenomegaly with increased splenic vein blood flow. So prehepatic, before the portal hepatic vein enters into the portal, prehepatic causes are before the portal vein enters into the liver. These causes can be portal vein narrowing, or it can be splenomegaly, which can put pressure on the vein, or it can be because of thrombosis. Post-hepatic causes: severe right-sided heart failure, constructive pericarditis, and hepatic vein outflow obstruction are the post-hepatic causes, and intrahepatic causes are your cirrhosis of the liver. The dominant intrahepatic cause of the portal hypertension is cirrhosis of the liver. So, portal hypertension can be seen if there is some narrowing of the portal vein before it enters into the liver, then it is called prehepatic causes. Hepatic cause, most important intrahepatic cause is the cirrhosis of the liver, and post-hepatic causes are also because of the right-sided heart failure, constrictive pericarditis, and hepatic vein outflow obstruction. Other intrahepatic causes can be schistosomosis, massive fatty change of the liver, diffuse fibrosing granulomatous diseases, sarcoidosis, nodular regenerative hyperplasia affecting the microcirculation. Increased resistance to portal flow at the level of the sinusoid is caused by contraction of the vascular-smooth muscle cells and myofibroblast, and disruption of blood flow by scarring and formation of parenchymal nodules. So most important intrahepatic causes cirrhosis of the liver. Other hepatic causes can be schistosomosis, that is the infection with the parasitic infection, massive fatty change of the liver, diffuse fibrosing granulomatous disease like sarcoidosis, nodular regenerative hyperplasia affecting microcirculation. Okay, all of these can cause resistance to the portal flow at the level of sinusoid, and it can be caused by the contraction of the vascular smooth muscle cells and myofibroblast, and disruption of blood flow by scarring and formation of parenchymal nodules. I hope it is clear. Alteration in the sinusoidal endothelial cells that contribute to the intrahepatic vasoconstriction associated with portal hypertension include decrease in nitric oxide in production and increased release of endothelin-1, angiotensinogen, and echonocytes. Sinusoidal remodeling and anastomosis between the arterial and portal system in the fibrous tissue septa contribute to portal hypertension on low pressure portal venous system. So intrahepatic causes, I've told you again, the sinusoidal endothelium cell can also play a part in intrahepatic vasoconstriction leading to portal hypertension, and there is going to be decrease in the nitric oxide production and increased release of endothelin, angiotensinogen, and echonocytes. And sinusoidal remodeling and anastomosis between the arterial and portal system in the fibrous tissue septa contribute to the portal hypertension on low pressure portal venous pressure. Okay, I hope it is clear. So sinusoidal remodeling and intrahepatic shunts, they also interfere with the metabolic exchange between sinusoid blood and hepatocyte. Another major factor in the development of portal hypertension is increase in portal venous blood flow resulting from hyperdynamic circulation. This is caused by vasodilation in splanchnic circulation. Tumor necrosis factor and prostacyclins are implicated in causing splanchnic vasodilatation. Nitric oxide also has a role. So other major factor in the development of portal hypertension is increase in the portal venous blood pressure resulting from hyperdynamic circulation. And this is caused by vasodilatation in the splanchnic circulation. Tumor necrosis factor and prostacyclin, they are also implicated in causing splanchnic vasodilatation. Nitric oxide has also a role, okay? Clinical consequence of portal hypertension. What are the clinical consequences? What the patient is experiencing when he or she is experiencing portal hypertension? Patient develops ascites, postsynaptic shunts, splenomegaly, hepatic encephalopathy. Ascites is the accumulation of excessive fluid in the peritoneal cavity. This is called ascites. It becomes clinically evident then where there is more than 500 ml of the fluid accumulates within the peritoneal cavity. Protein is less than 3 grams per deciliter. Mesothelial cells, few mononuclear cells, WBCs can be seen. If neutrophils are present, it suggests active infection or inflammation. If RBCs are present, it may be disseminated cancer which can be present. Seepage of peritoneal fluid through lymphatics can lead to hydrothorax as well, mostly on the right side. So the patient is going to experience ascites. Ascites, I have explained you, is the excessive accumulation of fluid in the peritoneal cavity, which become more than 500 when it is clinically detectable. It is serous in color, protein is less, 3 grams per deciliter, mesothelial cells, few inflammatory cells like lymphocyte, WBC may be present, and if neutrophils are present, then it suggests an acute inflammation or active infection, okay? If RBCs are present, then they suggest that there is a malignant condition going on or a disseminated cancer. Seepage of peritoneal fluid through lymphatics can lead to hydrothorax as well, mostly on the right side, okay? Pathogenesis of ascites is complex. It involves the following mechanism: sinusoidal hypertension during driving fluid into the space of DESI from where it is removed by hepatic lymphatics also lead to hypoalbuminemia. Percolation of hepatic lymph in the peritoneal cavity. Normal hepatic duct lymph flow is 800 to 1000 ml per day. It increases to 20 liters per day because exceeding the hepatic duct capacity. Splanchnic vasodilatation and hyperdynamic state is seen as well. Okay. And what are postsynaptic shunts? With the rise in portal system pressure, flow is reversed from portal to systemic circulation by dilatation of collateral vessels and development of new vessels. So the blood has to return for that reason because of the portal hypertension, their collaterals become which take the blood back to the heart. Venous bypasses develop. They develop where systemic and portal circulation they meet together. They share common capillary beds. The principal sites are around are veins around and within the rectum, which manifest as hemorrhoids. They are present around the gastroesophageal junction, which can lead to bleeding varices, or they can be present in the retroperitoneum and falciparum ligament of the liver involving periumbilical and abdominal wall collaterals. So number 2 is venous bypasses develops, which can be seen as postsynaptic shunts. Okay. Then esophageal varices. Esophageal varices are the collateral circulation which are present around the gastroesophageal junction. And the most important, they are the most important cause of the bleeding. They are seen in 40% of cases with advanced liver cirrhosis, and they can cause massive hematemesis. Abdominal wall collaterals appears as dilated subcutaneous veins exhibiting from umbilicus towards the rib margins, and they are known as caput medusae. It is an important hallmark of portal hypertension. So these caput medusae are present around the umbilicus when they are doing because of the development of the collateral circulation. So in the portal hypertension, you are going to see ascites, you are going to see postsynaptic shunts, which can be present around the umbilicus, which are known as caput medusae, or which can be present with gastroesophageal junction, where they can bleed as well. Massive hematemesis of bleeding occurs, and this is a life-threatening condition of the persons who are suffering from portal hypertension. Okay. Next is the splenomegaly. Long-standing congestion may cause congestive splenomegaly. Spleen weighs more than 1000 grams. Thrombocytopenia, pancytopenia develops because of the splenomegaly. Two other syndromes can also be seen: hepatopulmonary syndrome. It is seen in 30% of patients with liver cirrhosis and portal hypertension. This leads to intrapulmonary vasodilatation involving capillary and precapillary vessels up to 1000 micrometer in size. The blood flow rapidly giving inadequate time for oxygen diffusion, leading to ventilation perfusion mismatch, and right to left shunting results in hypoxia. So the hepatorenal syndrome is seen in 30% of cases in which patients with liver cirrhosis and portal hypertension. This leads to intrapulmonary vasodilatation involving capillaries and precapillary vessels up to 1000 micrometer in size. The blood flow rapidly giving rise to adequate time for the oxygen diffusion, leading to ventilation perfusion mismatch, and right to left shunting develops in results in hypoxia. Patients have poor prognosis, hypoxia and dyspnea occur in an upright position as gravity increases the ventilation perfusion mismatch. Decreased liver may not this diseased liver may not be clear vasoconstrictors such as endothelin 1 or produce vasodilators such as nitric oxide. Portopulmonary hypertension refers to pulmonary hypertension occurring in liver disease with portal hypertension, may be due to excessive pulmonary vasoconstriction and vascular remodeling. Clinical manifestations are dyspnea and clubbing of the fingers. Okay, so what are the clinical consequences of chronic liver failure? Ascites, postsynaptic shunts, splenomegaly, hepatic encephalopathy. Ascites, I've told you, is excess amount of fluid, more than 500 ml when it is present in the peritoneal cavity, then it becomes obvious. Okay, then I've told you what is the pathogenesis of ascites, which can be sinusoidal, hypertension, percolation of hepatic lymph in the peritoneal cavity, or splanchnic vasodilatation and hyperdynamic circulation. Then I told you what are postsynaptic shunts, venous bypasses, esophageal and gastric varices, abdominal wall collaterals. Okay. So now acute and chronic liver failure. Some individuals with subtle but well compensated advanced chronic liver disease suddenly develops acute liver failure. Established cirrhosis is present with extensive vascular shunting. Liver parenchyma has a borderline vascular supply. Patients with chronic hepatitis B infections get superinfected with hepatitis D virus and may undergo a sudden decompensation. Systemic causes like sepsis can also produce this condition. So acute and chronic liver failure can be there when the chronic liver failure is going stable, but suddenly acute signs develop on top of it. And this is present with extensive vascular shunting. Okay. And patients with chronic hepatitis B infection, if they get superadded hepatitis D infection, they can develop into a decompensated liver disease. Okay, this is the clinical consequences of portal hypertension, hepatic encephalopathy, malnutrition, skin, spider angioedema, endothelia, sorry, esophageal varices, portal vein. This is the portal vein. This is the splenic vein. Splenomegaly develop, cirrhosis develops, and periumbilical caput medusae. These are the caput medusae. Hemorrhoids develop congested blood vessel around the rectum. They are actually not hemorrhoid, but they are congested blood vessel because of the collateral circulation. Testicular atrophy might develop. And this is the collection of fluid within the abdominal cavity, and it has to be more than 500 ml before it becomes clinically evident. So this is the acute and chronic liver failure, and I'm going to cover one by one liver lectures so you can revise them, or because I'm disappointed, I came with the OSPE sessions. That would have been an interactive session if you have responded, and it could have been a preparation for your OSPE exam as well. But if you don't want it, that's okay with me. Okay, I'll see you on Monday then. Okay, thank you. मुझे USB दे दे।